Good morning, everyone. I am Beverly Habelio, and in today's report, I will discuss intellectual disabilities, types of intellectual disabilities, characteristics, causes, and symptoms, as well as educational challenges associated with intellectual disability. So, what is intellectual disability? Intellectual disability. Intellectual disability is a term used when a person has certain limitations in mental functioning and in skill such as communicating, taking care of himself or herself, and social skills. So, um, so the intellectual disability is a term used when there are limits to a person's ability to learn at an expected level and function in daily life. So a person with intellectual disability may process information slowly, find communicating and daily skills hard. So these limitations will cause a child to learn and develop more slowly than a typical child. A person with intellectual disability might have a hard time letting others know their wants and needs and taking care of themselves. So there are types of intellectual disability. First is Fragile X syndrome. Fragile X syndrome is the most common known cause of an inherited intellectual disability worldwide. It is a genetic condition caused by a mutation, a change in the DNA structure in the X chromosome. So this genetic condition can cause a developmental problems and usually have delayed their development of speech and language. Children and adults with full mutation Fragile X may have problems with memory, abstract thinking, problem solving, and planning. Usually, males are more severely affected by this disorder than females. The second type of intellectual disability is Down syndrome. Down syndrome is a disease or illness. It is a genetic disorder which occurs when someone is born with a full or partial extra copy of chromosomes in their DNA. So, Down syndrome is a genetic condition that happens when a child is born with an extra chromosome. Extra chromosome affects the way the child's brain and body develop na humantong sa mga pagkantala sa pag-unlad, kapansanan sa intelektual at mas mataas na panganib for certain medical issues. The third is developmental delay, when a child develops at a slower rate compared to other children of the same age. They may have a developmental delay. Mabagal ang developmental delay, mabagal ang kanilang paglaki kumpara sa ibang bata, and their ability to communicate, learn, and understand or interact with other child will be affected. Last one is Prader-Willi syndrome. It's a complex genetic condition that affects many parts of the body. So Prader-Willi syndrome is a syndrome leading to disability resource. It somehow makes people abnormal. It starts in infancy, which is characterized by weak muscle tone. So this type of syndrome can change not only the emotion or mental disturbance, but also the physical form of those who possess this kind of syndrome. Behavioral problems are also present. Bipolarity, outbursts, and sudden change of emotion are symptomatic. If this may occur to any infant, it will be dangerous. So be assured to make an appointment with a consultant immediately. The characteristic of intellectual disability. The common characteristic of intellectual disabilities, first is difficulty learning. Mahirapan silang matuto and processing information. Problems with abstract thought. Nagkakaproblema silang maunawaan at mag-isip gamit ang mga komplikadong mga konsepto, and problems with social interaction like mahirap sa kanilang makipag-interact, makipag-socialize sa ibang tao. So there are causes of intellectual disability. First is genetic conditions. So intellectual disabilities caused by genetics came from abnormal genes. Parents may pass these abnormal genes onto children, or errors could arise when genes combine in the womb that causes intellectual disabilities. So kapag may abnormal genes ka tapos nagkaanak ka, pwedeng mapasa mo ito sa iyong anak at mag-cause ng intellectual disabilities. Ang mga abnormal na gene ay maaaring mangyari mula sa mga impeksyon sa panahon ng pagbubuntis o mula sa mga bagay tulad ng sobrang pagkakalantad sa radiation mula sa X-ray. So the second is pregnancy issues. Pregnant mothers who use alcohols or drugs during pregnancy put their developing babies at risk for intellectual disability. So parents using alcohol or drugs during pregnancy can cause a child intellectual disability. Smoking during pregnancy can also increase the risk that a baby will have an intellectual disability. So it is better to avoid alcohol, cigarettes, and drugs during pregnancy to decrease the risk of intellectual disability. So the third is issues during birth. Issues during birth like premature birth and low birth weight can cause intellectual disability. And next is problems after birth. Sometimes childhood diseases can damage the brain, causing characteristic of intellectual disability. So example, injuries like a head injury or near drowning can cause a child to develop intellectual disability symptoms. So next is poverty and cultural factors. Children who live in poverty have a much higher risk of exposure to environmental toxins, diseases, and experiencing malnutrition. So these things all increase the risk that a child may develop characteristic of intellectual disabilities. So these are the symptoms of intellectual disability. First is sit up, crawl, or walk later than other children. Then learn to talk later or have trouble speaking. Then find it hard to remember things. Then have trouble understanding social rules. And have trouble seeing the results of their actions. And the last one is have trouble solving problems. Educational challenges of intellectual disability. So first is difficulty understanding new information. Example, they will receive information and it is difficult for them to understand it. Second, difficulties with communication and social skills. It is difficult for them to socialize. Then slow cognitive processing time. Like di sila makasabot, it needs to be explained repeatedly for them to understand. So difficulty in the sequential processing of information. And last is difficulty comprehending abstract concepts. So kanang maglisod sila comprehend